So, this is Curtis Yarvin. It's a name you might not know right now, but you should. He's the ideologue who's kind of inspired these Elon Musks, Peter Thiels, and Mark Andreessens of the world. These Silicon Valley types who are now advocating for the effective dissolution of the federal government. And you kind of see that already taking place with Elon Musk's Doge and this whole oligarchic takeover of the executive. We're going to talk more about Yarvin and the tech oligarchs in other videos, but for now, I'm just going to assume you have some baseline understanding of current events, and you understand that now more than ever, these people, Yarvin's followers that is, are in the ear of the president. Look, we'll come back to Yarvin in a later video. For now, kind of the main thing I want you to know about his beliefs is that central to Yarvin's ideology is kind of this idea that government, at its best, is essentially a corporation, and all that's needed for a government to be successful is a good CEO. I think it's pretty easy to see how he's been able to convince a lot of these tech leaders of his beliefs. And honestly, I think that there's a large group of people who would hear that and think like, oh, this is like a completely reasonable idea. Put yourself in their shoes. These people might say something like, okay, we have these gripes with the government being slowed by bureaucracy. It's inefficient. It doesn't work for the people. Hey, Yarvin might be onto something. It's like, okay, Curtis, how do we implement this? What really is a CEO?
No difference between a CEO and a dictator. If Americans want to change their government, they're going to have to get over their dictator phobia.
Oh, okay. So let's go back to Yarvin's central idea. A government is a corporation, so in order for it to be successful, we need a good CEO. A dictator. I want to take a trip through time and examine the most successful dictatorship in human history, the Roman Empire. I want to lay out the reasons why Curtis might actually be correct in his assessment that the best countries often are dictatorships. And I know that that's like a preposterous thing to say, so please just stay with me for a minute. I really want to talk about Marcus Aurelius, who is regarded as, if not the best, then one of the best Roman emperors. Marcus Aurelius ruled over the Roman Empire from 161 to 180 AD. And his reign is kind of the embodiment of this Pax Romana, which is like the golden age of Rome. It's a time of wealth and prosperity and at least internal peace. To give some context, Marcus Aurelius' time was characterized by these constant invasions of Rome. And despite this, he was able to maintain Rome's borders through the entirety of his reign. And a lot of historians credit Marcus Aurelius' chief authority as the reason why Rome was able to respond to these constant incursions. When the Roman Republic fell, it was largely caused by like warring egos among these ruling aristocrats, and bribery and corruption kind of consumed the Republic and laid the path for Julius Caesar and his successor. The first emperor of Rome was Octavian or Augustus. Largely, this infighting and the lack of direction, it caused the Republic to be too weak, in contrast to the empire, who, under emperors like Marcus Aurelius, allowed Rome to prosper. And that's a big thing. This is a big thing that dictators are able to do. They're able to have direction and take direction. I think this is what Curtis gets right. The best leaders are dictators. I know it's crazy, but the absolute direction of noble leaders, I think almost certainly will allow their nations to prosper. But I think that Curtis forgets one key point, and it's really simple. The worst leaders are also dictators. See, Marcus Aurelius came to power in a time of Roman prosperity. The 4 emperors who preceded him were the best rulers that Rome had ever seen. So it might have seemed reasonable for his son Commodus to succeed him and take the mantle of the emperor of Rome. Commodus inherited a stable empire and drove it into the ground. He appointed sycophants to government positions and refused to listen to what remained of his father's advisors. Kind of rather than govern, Commodus was far more interested in playing gladiator and killing cripples for sport. Beyond his indignification of the imperial office, his policies devalued the Roman currency and ultimately led Rome to rot from within. Historians really do agree that Commodus is the one who ended Pax Romana and began the decline of the Roman Empire. Even after he was assassinated, Rome was just never able to recover. So we come to this interesting point where, yes, the best leaders are dictators. But also, yes, the worst leaders are dictators. So does America need to get over its dictator phobia, like Yarvin says, and appoint a CEO dictator? Hell no. I mean, genuinely, it's a really stupid idea. Look at what happened to Rome. It doesn't exist anymore because a terrible dictator found their way to power and drove it into the dirt. I'll admit, I do believe that a noble dictator could raise a country to levels of prosperity not seen before, but a bad dictator could raise a country to a state of demise equivalent or even worse than the fall of the Roman Empire. I think the fundamental question that we must ask when questioning if America should be a dictatorship is, what are you willing to lose? Are you willing to lose your right of free speech? Are you willing to lose the ability to practice whichever religion you see fit? Are you willing to lose your life? Are you willing to lose these things for maybe better economic opportunities? Maybe greater peace? I know I'm not. So, look, I'll take this kind of bureaucratic mess of government we have. It's imperfect, but we can improve it. America is imperfect, but we can improve it. I think this is one of these core ideas that we have to have. I don't think that the way forward is by destroying the pillars of democracy and installing a dictator. I think that is the path that more than echoes the Roman demise and would almost assuredly lead to the destruction of the American state. And unfortunately, I think that's the path we're on. And I think the foundation has been laid over the last 200 years. The executive branch of the government has mightily outgrown how the great George Washington used the office. From the Monroe Doctrine to the New Deal to Iran-Contra to today, the executive branch, moreover the presidency, has become too powerful. I argue that we vest too much power in our commander-in-chief. We're a month into Trump 2.0 and we're already witnessing blatant abuses of executive power. Like what the fuck is Doge? I mean, come on, that shit cannot be legal. Come on. So I want to spend the rest of this video kind of rambling about how this great American representative democracy can be fixed. Give an alternative to tearing down everything that has been built thus far. I really want to talk about the shortcomings of our democracy, which is maybe a strange way to defend it, but I think you'll see it all kind of ties together. I think one of the most embarrassing failures of the U.S. government is that we somehow don't have universal health care, despite subsidizing the universal health care of literally every other Western country. And the reason we don't have it is basically just a function of lobbying. Pharmaceutical and insurance companies lobby against methods to provide universal health care because there's a lot of money to be had in healthcare. And I'm sorry to say this, but if you're out here thinking we shouldn't have universal health care or, a single payer system, you have been brainwashed. This little example of the US being terrible at managing healthcare actually contains literally every point of failure of a representative democracy. The first failure I want to talk about is that your representatives do not serve you. They serve themselves. Look, corruption and self-serving has always been a problem in aristocracies. I think studying the fall of the Roman Republic is a really good way to become acquainted with the failures of representative systems, but we're not going to look at that today. But this is why we have elections, and elections work great if people actually understand the issues that they're voting for. But people don't. And this is another major failure of our system. People have absolutely no clue how specific policy decisions could impact their life. This is an abject failure of both education and, I'd argue, people themselves. Socrates was incredibly skeptical of democracy. He believed that in order for it to work, all people needed to be educated about what they were voting for, and it's just not really the case. Another issue that Socrates kind of saw with democracy was that it was very susceptible to charismatic leaders who spoke to the populace and could get elected, but either they may have deceived the public in what they actually believe or aren't really good politicians. I think this is a fair criticism. And this is a broad criticism of populism as well. But some of this can be tampered with effective checks and balances. Let's go back to the healthcare example. The other critical point of our representative system is lobbying. And more specifically, I'm talking about the relationship between lobbyists and the donations that campaigns get. I think it's disgusting that there's all this money in politics at all. I think it's a complete failure of Congress to not ban this quid pro quo lobbying. I think it's definitionally corruption. And this is part of the reason why this push by oligarchs towards dictatorship actually makes sense. I think it's a couple of oddballs who have correctly identified that our current system is broken, but for some reason, they think that the only way to fix it is to burn it to the ground and start anew. I've just spilled out why the U.S. system is so shit. So now let me defend it by saying that we can fix it. To get money out of politics is actually incredibly easy. You pass a bill in Congress, the president signs it, that's it, it's over. But in order to do that, you need really courageous senators and representatives, and we don't really have that right now. Again, though, this is an issue that can be fixed. And I think the broader issue of education can actually be brute forced. Frequent and fair elections can allow people to vote based on their satisfaction with how they feel about their current representative, which means that you avoid the issue of phony, charismatic leaders, at least until you have to elect a new politician. But yes, our representative democracy is imperfect. And while there is an argument that we should consider destroying our current constitution and turning the U.S. into a dictatorship, I think it comes down to the issue of what are you willing to lose? And moreover, our current government can be fixed. We kind of spelled it out. There's only really a handful of issues. They're big, but we can fix it. We need courageous people that are willing to run for public office and make the necessary changes. This is an inflection point in American history and really world history. Will we succumb to some of the same pressures that caused the failure of the Roman Republic and led to the Roman Empire and Rome's eventual demise? I don't know. I don't know. But it's something to think about. Thanks for listening.